I freaking gasped when I saw this fabric at Joann. I was like, no, baby, you need to come home with me. If you know my sweet friend, Jen's Crafted Gems, to me, she's Spray Tan Jenny. You know that this is right up her alley. She is a gory queen. She loves all things bloody, gory, and this tumbler is for her. So I knew this was the perfect fabric for her. What I did was I wrapped my tumbler around with the fabric just to kind of see how much I was gonna need. And then I left about 2 inches extra, like of excess, so that I could, have enough fabric to do what I have to do and not run out and apply it on my tumbler and be like, oh no, I ran out of fabric. So make sure you leave about 2 inches around the circumference and about an inch in the height. And then also, once you have your fabric, you can kind of fold it in half and just cut the edges to make them a little bit more straight. They don't have to be perfectly straight, and you will see why once we get into this tutorial. I'm going to use washi tape to place a straight line down the center. This is going to be the guide where we're going to put our zipper. And the amazing thing about washi tape, it's super thin and it can stay on there. So I'm actually leaving this washi tape on there because this is my guide. I'm going to directly glue over it and epoxy over it, and it's going to be fine. So I am determining like the little V opening where the zipper is going to split, right? Because we want to make it look like we're unzipping the tumbler and revealing a different color inside of where the zipper is. So that's what I'm doing right now by separating my V. And you can do this however you want. You can make it as big as little as you want. Oh, and here's a little glimpse of my Baddiee brushes. They did sell out, all the ones I posted. I do have about 50 left, but I have to hold on to those guys because I'm giving some away at TumblerCon. I'm selling some. I also like to do lots of giveaways, but I promise it is my intention to restock these in August, God willing, right? So what I'm doing now is I'm taking Mod Podge and I am placing my glue on the outside of the V that we placed with our washi tape. The reason I'm only placing it on the outside is because we don't need the fabric on the inside of the V because that's going to be a different color. That's what's going to show like, oh my gosh, really? You're unzipping the cup and it's two different things. Oh, lo. That is why. So the amazing thing is once I'm done applying my fabric to the cup, because I did not apply glue inside of the V, I'm going to be able to lift up the fabric in that section and just cut it off because it's not going to be adhered to the cup. I hope this makes sense. And so what I do is I take my little sausage hands and I just press down and I make sure that I'm removing any air bubbles, any lumps, anything like that, and making sure that it's really adhered. One tip that I could give you, Mod Podge dries pretty fast. So if you push down on the fabric with your hands and just kind of wait a moment, like keep pressing down and smoothing it out until the Mod Podge underneath dries, you're not going to have any problem with the fabric lifting while you're moving on to the next section. Here you see me cutting off the excess that I mentioned before that did not stick to the tumbler because we did not put Mod Podge in this section. This helps me determine that inner V. Now, the great thing about this, guys, is you don't have to cut the fabric perfectly straight. You don't want to cut it too crazy and crooked because your zipper is thin, but you're going to be able to paint over to paint the perfect V after we finish Mod Podging. I'll show you in a second. So try not to worry so much about, oh my gosh, I'm not cutting in a perfectly straight line. Just try to get as close as you can to where that washi tape is underneath. And like I said, if you Mod Podge right on the outside of that line, it should be pretty easy to cut off the excess and reveal that V. So not to worry. Then, now I know we left about 2 inches to an inch of overhang. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring the fabric together right where that one line of washi tape is. We're going to cut the excess off, flatten it, and then we're going to glue it down. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want it to be like crazy off because you want your zipper to be able to cover it. But if you don't have a perfect seam, it's okay, just as long as you keep everything straight, because you will be relying on that one zipper to hide where your fabric meets. Then you take your Caesars. Every time I say Caesar, I think of Little Caesars. Pizza sounds so good right now. I wish I was the kind of human who craved salads or green juices, but no. I'm the kind of person that wants to suck grease out of a straw. Like, why am I like this? Ooh, look at that zoom action. We cut all of the excess fabric off of the rim, and then we came back in with Mod Podge and applied it at the rim. This, guys, is very important. If you have been watching me for a while, I always stress the importance of getting a perfectly good seal at the rim. This is so that your hard work isn't ruined when you epoxy, right? Because if epoxy gets underneath that fabric, your cup is ruined, your seal is broken, and there's no fixing it. And also, you know, if you don't get that perfectly sealed and you epoxy it and then you go to sand it and wash it, water will get in there and then your cup is ruined. So press your fabric at the rim as close as you can and make sure there is not a single space of fabric lifted. Everything completely adhered. Then we're going to move down to the bottom of the tumbler and we're going to cut the fabric as close as we can. The best tip I could give you is to just lay your scissors completely flat on the bottom, and that's going to help you cut it pretty precisely. We're going to repeat the process. We're going to brush some Mod Podge in the fabric and make sure it's completely adhered. In my personal opinion, in my humble opinion, this is the best way to do fabric tumblers when you want to do the fabric from top to bottom, because a lot of issues that people have is when they fold that fabric over on the bottom, they get all sorts of bumps and pointy edges, and then it is a pain to cover with epoxy. When you do it this way, you get that perfectly rounded off bottom and you have no issues when it comes to applying epoxy. See how perfectly that bottom is? There's no pointy edges. Once we have the rim and the bottom completely sealed and adhered and it's dry and everything is super stuck on the cup, we're going to go in with our very first coat of Mod Podge, a thin coat. We're going to brush it over the entire tumbler to start sealing it. And thin coats are very important because if your Mod Podge does not dry clear, it's not going to be clear under your epoxy. You're going to have all this murkiness. So thin coats. I know that you might want to do a super thick coat to finish faster, but trust me, thin coats is the way to go. And I use a blow dryer to help each coat dry in between. Just to be safe, I did 4 thin coats of Mod Podge over the entire tumbler. And I dried each layer in between with Mod Podge. And I made sure that the bottom had Mod Podge over it and the rim had a whole bunch of Mod Podge over it to completely seal it. And I left a little tiny bit of overhang, so I'm just going to go back and cut that excess. And that part is easy to cut off because it wasn't adhered to the tumbler. So just kind of making little adjustments. Now I'm going to take black chalk paint and this little flat edge sponge. You can get these at any craft store. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to paint that inner V. And this is going to be so cool when we put our zipper on here because it's legitimately going to look like you're unzipping the cup and revealing something totally different on the inside. So you can choose any color fabric that you want. You could choose anything at all that you want to do. This is just what I decided to go with. Now, this is the part where you want to try to keep a pretty straight line as much as you can when you're going down and painting your inner V, because you are going to place your zipper and hide where your paint meets your fabric. So you don't want to have like swirls or anything like that. You can use a ruler. You can use anything that you want as a guide to help you keep it perfectly straight. I really thought that this sponge was helpful. Then I came down and I did the same thing to the bottom. I just painted it black. And as you can see a little bit on the left-hand side, there's a little opening where you can see a little bit of stainless steel. Do not worry about that. That's where our zipper is going to go. Then I added 40 mLs of epoxy, 20 of part A and 20 of part B, and I let it spin overnight. I cannot get over how much I love this, you guys. Now, I personally wanted to use this zipper. It's like red, but the red's not going to show too much, maybe a little, but I really like the gunmetal color. I'm like, ooh, this is gonna look so cool. The good thing is craft stores and Amazon and Walmart have any color zipper you could imagine. So like I always tell you, the possibilities are freaking endless. So what you want to do is cut off that excess fabric of the zipper as close as you can to where the zipper actually is. You want to remove all that excess fabric. You might want to use a pair of little scissors to help you get into those like little areas. See those little areas where there's a little bit of fabric left? I'm just going to get in there and cut all of that fabric off, and you can zip it up and down just to make sure you're not missing any fabric. You know, that just cut as close as you possibly can, and you want to try to keep it straight and even, because this part, all of this zipper is going to be exposed. It's going to show, it's going to be the centerpiece, the focal point of your cup. So you do kind of want to make sure that you cut off all the excess and you don't have random big pieces of fabric sticking out. Now, a really good tip for all those little like flyaway little pieces of fabric, we don't want those to end up in our epoxy. We don't want those to end up all over our tumbler, because that would be no good. So you can take a lighter and just kind of hit the edges of the fabric with the lighter, and that is going to get everything under control for you. Now I'm going to just kind of measure out my zipper, make sure that I'm going to be able to have good coverage. And this is what I meant when I said keep that line as straight as possible where your V goes up, because you have a very small piece of zipper that's going to be dividing the black from the fabric, and you want to make sure that you are able to completely hide that where they meet with that little skinny piece of zipper. I personally am using a hot glue gun, but there are many ways to apply zippers. This is just the way I did it. You can use E6000. Please keep in mind E6000 releases toxic fumes, so please do that outside or wear a mask. Also, you can use that two-part Bob Smith epoxy. You can use fabric glue. You could use UV resin. Really, any strong adhesive you can use to apply your zipper. I just chose to do a hot glue gun. And so I am just, kind of placing a little bit of hot glue, a very skinny line right in the center where that paint meets that fabric. And I'm doing little sections at a time because hot glue dries very quickly. And I want to make sure that I have enough time to press down my zipper. And you don't want to do a very bulky amount of hot glue, because you want to be able to press your zipper down as much as possible. And the good thing is, we're going to come over this with multiple coats of epoxy, so we're going to really secure our zipper on the cup. So, all right, so now this is something that I would have done differently. So if you're watching this, make sure that you cut your zipper before you tape it, before you glue it all the way down. You do not want the zipper to go all the way up to the very top. The reason you don't want to do that is because you're not going to be able to get a proper seal on that rim, and you don't want your hard work to be compromised. What I should have done, and I'm going to show you here in just a moment, is I should have cut off a little piece of the zipper at the very top so that I could adhere the epoxy to the rim of the tumbler and not have zipper all the way go to the top. I'll show you in just a moment what I'm talking about. I took a very fine paintbrush with a little bit of black chalk paint, and I kind of just stuck it in the areas where the hot glue was. This was to disguise it and for people not to be able to see, hey, there's hot glue under there. So I kind of just did that to disguise the glue, and it looked pretty stinking good. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix this little mistake that I made. I'm taking a paper towel soaked in alcohol and rubbing alcohol, and I'm just going to kind of soak that little piece of hot glue at the very, very top. And I'm going to unpeel just a tiny piece and remove the smallest piece of zipper. Now, if you use your scissors to cut in between each little line, it's easy to cut. Now, if you see I left just a tiny little piece exposed at the top, that's going to help me properly seal in that zipper to where my cup is long-lasting, good quality product. So do not bring your zipper all the way to the very top. Hopefully, you will save yourself some time and do it that way the first time. Now, what I'm doing before I epoxy over my zipper is I'm taking a little bit of UV resin and I am sealing the sides because I don't want any epoxy to get under there, because if I don't have a proper seal in there, the epoxy is going to seep under there and it's going to release air bubbles while it's spinning, and that's going to be kind of hard to fix later on. So just take the extra time to properly seal your zipper. You can probably do this with Mod Podge if you want to, or any other sort of sealer. I like to use UV resin. That's just my favorite. And I did this on both sides of the zipper. I did it in between each little opening, all the nooks and crevices, all that. And I also used UV resin to adhere my zipper down, because if you don't secure that little zipper while your cup is spinning, it may dry standing straight up, like sticking up out of the cup, if you understand what I mean. And that's going to be also hard to fix. So make sure you secure that zipper with UV resin. UV resin has a very strong hold, which is why it's my choice to use it in this case. And as you can see, I'm just taking that UV resin and just getting in there, getting in all the little areas that can possibly release air while I'm epoxying, and just securing everything, making sure it's going to be good. I also put a little thin coat of UV resin in the black area because I wanted to place my decal on it before going in with my epoxy. So this is the decal. I did get the font from Creative Fabrica. I do have a link where you can try Creative Fabrica for just $1 for your first month. So if you would like to take advantage of that and browse through all of the amazing options, I will link that in the description for you. There is no commitment. You can cancel after the month and then you only lost $1. Here you see me taking rubbing alcohol and a paper towel and removing all of my fingerprints off of the cup because I've been manhandling it and I don't want any of those fingerprints to show under the epoxy. Now I am doing a very thin coat because I'm gonna probably do about 2 or 3 coats. Actually, I did 3 coats over the zipper. And so I don't want puddles of epoxy in those little nooks and crevices and all those little areas. I don't want that because that's just I'm gonna lose the detail of the zipper and it's gonna look sloppy and it's gonna look yucky. So you want to make sure that you take your time and you do a very thin coat. I do not recommend using any sort of fast set for this first coat because it's going to take you a minute to make sure that you're getting, epoxy in all of the areas, to make sure that you're securing the zipper, to make sure that you don't have pools of epoxy. And if you were working with a fast set, it would dry on you and start to harden before you had the time to fully finish. As you can see, I'm kind of taking my time and just kind of going slow, making sure I have full coverage. And when you're applying, make sure you're applying thin coats and completely controlling where that epoxy is going so that it doesn't pool up in those little, puddle up in those little sections. I am super happy with how this cup turned out. I hope she loves it. She hasn't seen it yet. I'm going to post it in a little bit on my Instagram for the big reveal. I did design the coffin. Well, I guess not design, it's just a coffin, but I did draw it on my iPad and shade it in and all of that stuff. So I'm pretty proud of that. And then I took her logo, which was designed by that little logo lady, and I just placed it on top of the coffin. This is totally Jen's vibe. And I'm super excited for her to see this. Guys, make sure you take your finger and run it on either side of that zipper to make sure that you're getting that full coverage, but also to make sure that you're removing any excess and not allowing for pools of epoxy to stay there, because that, like I mentioned before, that will look a little sloppy. So I'm gonna let this spin overnight, okay? And then after this, I came back with 3 other coats to completely seal this zipper in. Another tip I forgot to tell you is you can take one of those fine paintbrushes and get into those little areas and make sure that you're completely getting full coverage over the zipper, making sure you're, for all of the little detail work. So this is what it looks like with just 1 coat of epoxy. As you can see, we've got pretty good coverage, but there are still little areas that need more epoxy, which, like I mentioned before, I ended up doing a total of 3 coats. So I feel like I completely secured the zipper and I have a really good product that's gonna last. You can do as many coats as you want. After the first coat over the zipper, I took an X-Acto knife and I took a sanding block and I removed a tiny bit of fabric and everything off of the very rim, because you want to always have just the smallest little piece of exposed stainless steel at the top, because that is what your epoxy is going to grab onto, and that's what's going to secure your cup and completely seal your supplies. So I'm not going to make you guys watch me do 2 more coats, but here is the final product. I hope that you guys love it, and I will be back on Wednesday with another video. I love you so much. Thank you for watching. Besitos. If you guys try a zipper cup, please tag me on Instagram so I can see. Mwah! Besitos.